Hello and welcome to the class. Causes for violation of socio-cultural and economic rights of women is the topic which we are going to discuss in today's class. Women have struggled in every historical epoch and in every part of the world for equal treatment. In the early part of the 19th century, the right of women to receive education, to obtain paid employment, to enter professions, to vote, and to stand for elections were all highly contested issues. However, by the end of the century, these rights, which could be described as a part of the liberal democratic political agenda, have been both recognized and established through law and customary practice in most of the societies. Women in many parts of the world still face multiple obstacles in enjoying their economic, social, and cultural rights, in which India is not an exception. These rights, such as the right to education, right to housing, right to adequate standard of living, right to health, etc., are recognized and protected in international and regional human rights instruments. Member states have a legal obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill economic, social, and cultural rights and are expected to take progressive action towards their fulfillment. First of all, let us talk about the international standards. Economic, social, and cultural rights are part of the universal human rights legal framework in which all rights are universal, indivisible, and interdependent and interrelated. Like civil and political rights, they aim to protect human dignity by establishing both negative and positive obligations for states. Economic, social, and cultural rights establish the minimum conditions required for people to live in a dignified way, to ensure freedom from fear and want, and the continuous improvement of these conditions. Economic, social, and cultural rights are enshrined in various international instruments such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948 and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights 1966. Both the declarations and the covenant provide for the rights to work, just and favorable conditions of work, form and join trade unions, protection of the family, maternity and childhood, social security, adequate standard of living, including adequate food, clothing and housing, health, education, take part in cultural life, benefit from scientific progress, and protection of the moral and material interest of authors of scientific, artistic, or literary works. The right to property is mentioned in the Declaration and Regional Human Rights Treaties and has been interpreted, for example, as protecting housing, indigenous peoples, ancestral territories, indemnities for unfair dismissal, and the rights to social security. Many other binding universal human rights instruments also provide for the promotion and protection of economic, social, and cultural rights, including International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, Convention on the Rights of the Child, Convention on the protection of the rights of all migrant workers and members of their families, and Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Next, let us have a thorough discussion on the national standard. The directive principles under the Constitution of India are indeed the precursor to the economic, social and cultural rights specified in the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights 1966. They reflect the consensus on the intrinsic necessity of this means and envisage state action which would facilitate the transfer and distribution of power, leading to transmission of power to the citizens, and this is loosely called empowerment of the people. The directive principles cannot be confined to mere rhetoric or to ad hoc policies of electoral appeasement or handouts. The Indian Supreme Court has adopted an expansive interpretation of the constitutional right to life based on principles of human dignity to protect certain economic and social rights, including the right to adequate nutrition, clothing and shelter, the right to medical facilities, the right to earn a livelihood, and environmental rights. Now let us have more discussions on the causes for violation. The impediments or the causes for violation of women's equal exercise and enjoyment of economic, social and cultural rights include, first of all, social norms, customs and traditions that legitimize women's inequality. Secondly, failure to take account of women's disadvantage or their distinct experiences when designing laws or measures to implement economic, social and cultural rights. Thirdly, restrictions on access to legal or administrative bodies where remedies for rights violations may be sought. Fourthly, women's underrepresentation in decision-making processes. Fifth, women's unequal status in their families. Sixth, failure to recognize women's remunerated work and to encourage the fairer distribution between women and men of family and communities supporting labor. Seventh, neglect of women's economic, social and cultural rights in conflict and post-conflict situations. Eighth, gender differentiated effects of economic globalization. These impediments must be addressed and eliminated to ensure that measures adopted to implement economic, social and cultural rights will benefit women equally. Some of the examples of violations of economic, social and cultural rights of women are forcibly evicting women from their homes, denying access to information and services related to sexual and reproductive health, failure to prevent employers from discriminating in recruitment that is based on sex, disability, race, political opinion, social origin, HIV status, etc. Traditional, historical, religious, or cultural attitudes are also used to justify and perpetuate discrimination against women in the delivery of economic, social, and cultural rights, including health services and education by public and private agencies. Inequality in women's enjoyment of economic, social, and cultural rights contributes to their economic dependence, denial of personal autonomy, and lack of empowerment. These, in turn, limit women's ability to participate in public life, including economic, social, political, legal policy, and decision making. It is especially important that women's entitlement to equal enjoyment of economic, social, and cultural rights is acknowledged and re-emphasized in the current climate of neoliberalism and economic globalization. Policies of privatization, economic austerity, and structural adjustment have negative impacts for women. For example, women are often hardest hit by economic transition, financial crisis, and rising unemployment. Furthermore, poverty can lead to a decrease in food intake among women and girls. Girls are the first to drop out from schools. Greater number of women are forced to migrate, vulnerable to trafficking, violence, and ill health. Economic and political insecurity provoke private and public backlash against women's rights that may be expressed through violence and articulated in the form of defending cultures and traditions. After all the discussions we had, now we can conclude that economic, social, and cultural rights have a particular significance for women because they go to the heart of issues related to poverty and inequality. International Women's Rights Watch, Asia Pacific, and International Network for Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights have been consistently promoting a holistic approach for realization of women's human rights through mobilization and capacity building of civil society. Women's rights organizations and NGOs advocating on economic, social, and cultural rights. Promoting and protecting the economic, social, and cultural rights of women provides a unique opportunity to link with strategies for defense of civil and political rights. It also challenges many existing assumptions regarding women's role in society and can lead to substantive changes in the unequal power relations between men and women. One strategic area of work for the promotion of women's economic and social rights is that of building alliances between women's rights groups and human rights groups. In addition, it is important to support linkages between women's groups and other social movements that work in the area of economic and social justice.